If we have a reasonable level of interpersonal confidence, that means we can tap into other people's knowledge, skills. We have the capability of making better quality decisions. This is where some research sheds a light that shows us the complexity, because we know that the more mentally tough are better at divergent thinking. So the more mentally tough will engage with other people, but they're more likely to be challenging. They won't necessarily toe the line. They won't necessarily do what the leader asks them to do. The more mentally sensitive tend to adopt convergent thinking. We're more interested in behavior. And are we behaving appropriately? Are we behaving in the right way? And mental toughness in that context is an enabler. It's not an outcome.
And welcome back. I'm David Charlton, and today's episode is a good one yet again. I'm joined once more by Doug Strycharczyk from AQR International for the second part of our conversation. And this time we dig into something that sits at the heart of performance in sport, business, and everyday life. How we make decisions when we don't have perfect information. We talk about confidence, self-belief, groupthink, leadership, risk, learning, and how the 4 C's of mental toughness quietly shape the choices we make under pressure. It doesn't matter what your background is, this conversation is going to help you better understand what's really going on inside your head when it matters most. Let's get started. That's fascinating, which takes us on to confidence. And I suppose in this respect, if we explore having trust in our decision making without, I guess, perfect information, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, confidence, self-belief consists of two components, and they're really both aspects of confidence and abilities. One of them, we call it confidence and abilities, and it's about the extent to which we have confidence in our skills, our knowledge, and our experience to be able to use them to solve problems, to deal with whatever comes our way. So that's to make good decisions. It doesn't mean to say we have perfect knowledge. We have belief in the knowledge we've got, that we have a good chance of dealing with what lies ahead. Interpersonal confidence brings another dimension. That's about our a self-belief in our ability to engage with other people. Now, that's of value because not every decision we make can be made entirely by ourselves. We don't know everything. And if we have a reasonable level of interpersonal confidence, that means we can tap into other people's knowledge, skills. So we have the capability of making better quality decisions. So if we have both in play, we are pretty confident we're going to be able to deal with pretty much whatever life throws at us.
And really, the interpersonal confidence side of things, it's going to have a huge impact when it comes down to organizations, to team environments, isn't it? Yes, with a higher level of interpersonal confidence, you'd be more likely, as you say, you're going to work with others, and then group think comes into play, and more ideas are generated, and it's going to have a huge impact on decision making as a whole, as a group.
And this is where some research, it's been around for some time, sheds a light that shows us the complexity, because we know that the more mentally tough are better at divergent thinking. So the more mentally tough will engage with other people, but they're more likely to be challenging. They won't necessarily toe the line. They won't necessarily do what the leader asks them to do. The more mentally sensitive tend to adopt convergent thinking. They tend to go along with the prevailing wisdom and whatever the group is wanted to say or to do. Now, there are consequences to that. It means that sometimes if you have a leader who isn't particularly, he can persuade the team to do things that they know they shouldn't be doing, but won't speak up and say you shouldn't be doing that. And we've just seen that. If you look at the papers at the beginning of the week, there's a case study from Google, and where a person, we don't like this term, was a whistleblower, and she whistleblew what her boss was doing and what other people in the team were doing. And then Google investigated it, but the rest of the team knew what was happening was wrong, but didn't say anything about it. So there was, we look at teamworking and we think, well, teamwork is good. It's a real aspect. but team working has its own complexities as well. And mental toughness can shine a light onto why sometimes team working works and why sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, teams are most definitely complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have a leader who lacks self-awareness, is very interpersonally confident in their ability, and yeah, high on mental toughness, then wow, yeah, as you say, they could shut down a lot of people, couldn't they? And they then don't allow the group think and the brainstorming of ideas to take place.
Especially if they've got high levels of interpersonal confidence, they can dominate a discussion. They
Yeah,
can
yeah.
dominate the team.
Yeah, so the key there is, if for organizations, for teams, if they are trying to look at various different options, is to be able to throw one's ego out of the room and give everybody a space to, yeah, to work through things.
And there are coping mechanisms that people can adopt. I mean, when I was a consultant, you get to see senior people in organizations that get to the top because they have those superior levels of interpersonal confidence. So they do tend to dominate meetings. And the way that you deal with it is we would say, go around the table, one idea at a time. Once somebody's spoken, they can't speak again until everybody else has spoken. There are mechanisms you can adopt.
Exactly, yeah, just very, very simple things like that. In terms of confidence in ability, then, how do you find practitioners shape and try and help people improve their confidence and ability so that they can make better decisions under pressure? What sort of tools are generally used?
Okay, so you've actually touched upon something that's interesting and important. When we look at the 8 factors and the 4 C's, and we talk about wanting to improve or develop, generally have to start from confidence. Because if you don't have confidence in your abilities and skills and your knowledge, you're not going to build that platform to be able to build all the other C's. So developing confidence is a good starting point in most situations. To develop confidence and abilities, then generally it falls back into all the positive thinking tools and techniques. The challenge with positive thinking tools and techniques is they all work, but they don't work for all people. And they tend to work better for people who already think positively. So they need careful introduction. It's no point saying to somebody who has a low level of self-belief, adopt self-talk and start using positive language in your head, because without telling you, what was happening in their head is, I don't buy that. I can't think positively. So you need to kind of introduce it carefully. Sometimes using one of the other C's, you might say, okay, let's combine purpose with achievement orientation. Let's set little milestones. Let's see if you can practice self-talk a step at a time until you develop a reasonable level of self-talk and it's actually making a difference for your confidence and abilities. But it's all about sustaining practice. In sport, we talk about purposeful practice. I'm going to show you a technique, but you've got to practice it until it becomes embedded. That's true in mental toughness development.
Yeah, like going to the gym, isn't it? If you wanna build strength, then yeah, you've got to put the reps in
Yeah.
ultimately.
Yeah. Until it becomes a default response.
Yeah, most definitely. And I know you talk about enablers quite a lot, don't you, in the mental toughness world. Do you want to just share with the listeners, viewers, a little bit more about enablers and how that links with confidence?
Yeah, well, we obviously get very excited about mental toughness and the 8 factors and how it can explain your default mental responses. What's going through your head when something happens, when you need to do something. And that is very, very useful. In fact, it's fundamentally important. That's why we bang on about self-awareness. But the reality is, most of us are not interested in that. That's not an outcome. We're more interested in behavior. And are we behaving appropriately? Are we behaving in the right way for the situation? And mental toughness in that context is an enabler. It's not an outcome. Mental toughness is one of the most important, one of the biggest factors influencing our behavior. So if we can understand why we think in a particular way and how it's influencing our behavior, we can do something about behavior. Too many people try to attack behavior at that superficial level, but it doesn't work. CBT has a moderate degree of success, but it's not as successful as people would like it to be. And one of the reasons is you're not going back to the root source of that behavior, which is mental toughness. So we're very clear. Mental toughness is an enabler, and it is incredibly nuanced. That's the other term that is sort of entering our vocabulary, because you can look at 100 people who all behave in the same way, but the source of that behavior will be different. And that explains why one-size-fits-all approaches fail so miserably. We have to operate at a customized level with people. And that requires coming back down to understanding people's mental toughness.
No, most definitely. It has me thinking what exercise I like to do when I'm working with an athlete around confidence is to get them to think about where they get confidence from. So if they're going to perform on a weekend, for argument's sake, is it like positive feedback from your coaches, praise from your teammates, having a good breakfast in the morning? What are the things that make you feel good and help you feel more confident on the day? And everybody's a little bit different. I remember working with a motocross rider a few years ago, and motocross, like lots of sport these days, is big into sport science and nutrition being one of them. And this this guy was following everything to a T, nutritionally, physically in the gym and what have you. But it just sort of stripped away his identity, and it was becoming too serious. So what we agreed, he would have one pint and a burger the night before he raced, just as a way of like trying to relax him and what help and to help his decision making, I guess. And sure enough, he raced and he went and did really, really well. But yeah, I don't know. As I said, it's just so nuanced and complex, and you've really got to help people with their understanding of themselves ultimately.
And the key really is, it's not always change, it's understand. That's why we bang on about self-awareness. And a few months ago, John and I were talking, he was talking about an athlete he was working with who had a very high level of achievement orientation and a very low level of confidence and abilities, around about STEM 2, bottom 7% of the population. But this was a very aspirational athlete. And I have been working with a concert pianist who has exactly the same, very high level of achievement orientation, very low level of confidence and abilities, even though she's acknowledged globally as a brilliant pianist. She doesn't believe in herself. John said, eventually worked out that his athlete, that's a profile of a perfection. That's somebody who wants to be the best and doesn't believe they're the best, so they keep trying to be even more perfect. That was the case with my pianist. When I sat down with the pianist, we went through, bear in mind, this is 12 years ago. We kind of explored what was going on in her head. And one of the things that's popped out was that when she performed, she suffered from a kind of stage fright. She thought everybody in the audience was examining her carefully and was spotting every mistake, every incorrect piece of phrasing and so on, and were being critical of her. And even if they applauded, they were just being polite and knew how many mistakes she made. People make mistakes. She just wasn't prepared to accept mistake. So we kind of continued that conversation. We came to the same conclusion that John came to with his athlete. This was their motivation. And she didn't want to change her low level of confidence and abilities. She saw it as her driver, and she wanted that driver. But with self-awareness, she knew that whether she wanted to or not, every now and again she had to switch off and chill out, because if she didn't, she'd burn out. So people burn out because they don't understand that they're getting past the critical point. So she would never know what that critical point was. So she had to build that in.
Yeah, that sounds very similar to the motocross rider I was talking about, in the burger in the before performing. How things can just build up and build up, especially if you've got that perfectionist.
So when we talk about mental toughness being the enabler, this is enabling us to understand the person, not necessarily to change them. because who they are is already making them work effectively, but we just don't want them to collapse. We
Yeah.
want them to
Yeah.
optimize.
Most definitely. So we've touched on three C's. We haven't gone for challenge yet. So yeah, tell me more about challenge when it comes down to decision making. Obviously, you've got risk orientation and learning orientation. That's it's a big area.
This is something that particularly interested me, in the development of the thing. We've all made our contributions, Peter, obviously, with the 4Cs, John. This is my little contribution, because when we only described it as challenge, we began to work with senior leaders in organizations. And senior leaders, almost by definition, are people who look over the horizon, look at what lies ahead, and they're supposed to be risk orientated because they're stepping into the unknown. They're taking the people with them. And what we saw was people would take those risks. They'd come up with fantastic strategies. They think they could enter a new market. They thought they could develop a new product, and it didn't work. What we found is that some would say, "Oh, that didn't work. Let's bin it. Let's forget about it." Others would say, "That didn't work. That was uncomfortable. But hang on, let's look at it again. Can we make it work? Can we learn something from that to make sure next time we try something, it really does work?" And so what we were able to do is separate risk orientation, our mental approach to certainty, to the unknown, from learning orientation. And there's an interplay. So some people will have a high level of risk orientation. They're prepared to make decisions with very little information, almost on a hunch, but they will either learn from it when it goes wrong, or they won't learn from it when it goes. And you'll have people who will be risk averse. They will have the opposite. Not take risks, then move forward a step at a time, and they will either learn from it or not learn from it. It's got a crucial role to play in that kind of decision making that takes us into the unknown. We can make decisions in the world we understand. It's a decision making in take where things aren't so clear. And so this is about being able to step into that world with I was going to use the word confident. It's not quite that. It's with a degree of belief that whatever I come across, I'm going to be comfortable about dealing with. And also, if it goes wrong, it's not going to be a complete failure from that.
And I suppose thinking about the high risk taker, there's an overlap with some of the other measures here, but they could essentially be quite narrow in the way they think, potentially, and not be good at looking at a variety of different options out there.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. So you might be very blinkered, and you might take a step into, saying, right, I'm going to go and start an office in Japan, and not realize that you're actually operating in a Southeast Asian context. And there are other things you've got to bear in mind. So, for instance, we've opened up in Korea, and what we've learned is the Koreans and the Japanese aren't very friendly with each other. As a rule, there's no advantage in going to Japan and saying, "We've got a Korean operation, can we come here?" It's not quite as bad as that, but there is a historical reason for that.
And as well, the thought processes behind all of this. If we've got a pressure situation, the risk taker is certainly going to interpret pressure a lot differently to the person who plays it safe.
Yeah.
And which I guess is then the story in their head then plays out with the decisions they make.
Yeah. So risk orientation is largely about doing your best to see what lies ahead, knowing that there is a risk that things will go wrong because you've seen things go wrong in the past. But you also know that the future always contains opportunity. Somebody who has got a high level of risk orientation will say, "I'm quite prepared to go after the opportunity. I can deal with it when it goes wrong." Somebody who's got a low level will say, "I'm not sure I can go after that, because if it goes wrong, I'm not going to be very happy. I'm not going to be a very contented individual." I'm actually slightly more interested in the learning orientation for a particular reason. When you go back, all the way back to what mental toughness is about, we know roughly half is genetic in origin. And roughly half is experiential. You've learned about half of your mental toughness from your life's experiences. And in the early years, that's your parents, teachers, peers. And people often say, was it the Jesuits used to say, give me the boy of 7 and I'll give you the man. In the belief that you've actually learned your fundamental approach to life by that
Yeah.
point. So if mental toughness is significantly developed through your learning orientation, there's actually a very significance to the learning orientation factor.
Yeah, most definitely. Because if you're going to be low in learning orientation, then your processes towards learning aren't going to be particularly great, and you're just going to keep repeating the same mistake.
Absolutely.
And
And if you want to kind of develop your mental toughness, you stand a better chance if you've got a high level of learning orientation.
and there's so many people out there, and I guess the way of the world these days, people wanting things in an instant and not very good at actually sitting back and
Well, I
taking the
think
time to learn.
I've got a webinar later on this month in the Far East, and it's to look at artificial intelligence and mental toughness. And I think you might be touching upon it. Until now, we've been able to kind of manage to some degree the flow of information to learn from it. You look at artificial intelligence and what it's doing to social media, it's putting rubbish into the system. We've seen so much fake stuff appearing, and you think, is that a fact or not? And it's how do we select what we learn from? That's another issue. It's a wider issue beyond mental toughness.
Yeah, which I guess it illustrates that complexity again, because you could then, if you get back to the whole goal setting and the commitment side and achievement orientation, and loops back around there.
You think about sports coaches, and sports coaches will work with their athletes or their teams. But what happens if people in those teams and those athletes are also going onto social media and picking up, um, you know, alleged features by other coaches who say, don't do this, do this, and make it sound very appealing. Now, how the hell do you manage that?
It's scary, isn't it? Especially now, where the social media platforms are built, the algorithm is set up for if you're searching and looking for things,
Yeah.
it knows it so well that it just brings more and more of that up. So yeah, it'll cause a few headaches for coaches and in the workplace as well. Right. Well, look, fighting stuff, Doug. Normally, how I end the podcast is by asking for 3 key takeaways. How do you summarize this into 3 key takeaways? Good luck.
Well, I think there are 3 takeaways. I mean, the concept is an extremely valuable way to support understanding yourself. So I think the first thing is develop self-awareness, understand who you are, because you are going to prosper. We talk about completing the mental toughness questionnaire, investing in some feedback. That's worth its weight in gold to almost everyone. And I think that's one takeaway. Second one is really, for me, it's about understanding that I am unique. I am different. Stop thinking about me as a type or a label. I am completely unique, and I will respond to the world in my way. And I need to understand that. Help me understand that.
I suppose one of the takeaways for me from this conversation is the fact that we look at the various different measures of the mental toughness model. It just goes to show how complex creativity and decision making is, and how it overlaps into so many various different elements. It's not a case of links to your label, where we're looking at things as good and bad. Are we creative? Are we not creative? Well, actually, there's so much to it.
I think that's a great third point, because people will often look at mental toughness and mental sensitivity in the same way that look at strengths and weaknesses and growth and fixed mindset. It isn't about good or bad. It is simply about who you are. You're actually, no matter who you are, pretty normal. You are just who you are. And the trick is to optimize that.
Yeah. And mental toughness can help us all learn so much in that respect. So Doug, whereabouts can the listeners and the viewers find you should they want to reach out?
Well, I mean, they can obviously connect with you, and because hopefully you're getting more involved in what we do. But the company is AQR International, so it's aqrinternational.co.uk, or me, it's doug@aqr.co.uk. Very simple. I'm also on LinkedIn, so by all means, try to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, you're quite busy on LinkedIn, so people will definitely be able to reach out there. Brilliant. Well, now a big thank you again for your time, as always. It's been really, really insightful.
Well, thank you very much, David. And it all helps to remind me we're progressing all the time with this concept. We're beginning to understand it more and more each year. So I'm looking forward to come back in 2 years' time.
Sounds good to me. So as we wrap up, what really stands out from today's conversation with Doug is just how deeply the 4 C's of mental toughness shape the way we think, we feel, and we decide. So our actions. Confidence isn't just about believing you're good. It's about trusting your skills and trusting yourself to work with other people. Challenge, through risk orientation and learning orientation, determines whether we shrink away from uncertainty or step into it and grow from it. And then there's the other 2 C's that we discussed in the previous episode, control and commitment. Commitment shows up in how willing we are to keep practicing, keep reflecting, and keep showing up when things get uncomfortable. Control, well, it helps us manage what's happening inside our head when pressure really does hit, and especially when we don't have certainty. And what Doug really brings to life is that mental toughness isn't about changing who you are. It's about understanding yourself well enough to optimize who you already are. So here's a question I'd like to leave you with. If mental toughness is about understanding yourself, how well do you really know the way your mind works when you're under severe pressure? Give it some thought. Now, on the topic of learning, I've got to hold my hands up. I've made a schoolboy error with the recording of this episode and the previous one. My mic wasn't rigged up correctly, which has meant that the audio quality isn't the best. There's an echo. So, sincere apologies for this oversight. It certainly won't happen again soon, but if I'm honest, I can't promise it won't happen again. So, yeah, I'm far from perfect, just like everybody else. And anyway, look, until next week, take care of yourself. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sport psychology resources. The Sport-Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.